Hello. Hello everybody, thanks loads for being here. If you see me glancing down, it'll just be at the notes, the questions. And the main note I put for myself was, don't overcomplicate it. I put that in massive big black letters, got ink all over my hands, and then all over my face. So which I think is a really useful illustration of how in keeping things simple, things get messy really quickly. And I think that's what we're going to touch on today. I'm going to introduce the wonderful people you've got here, give a quick overview of what I think where we're at, and then try and use your good selves to help us to explore why we're here. So the aim is to provide fuel for the conversations, not to give a big lecture about anything. But as a special treat for the people who are online, we kind of have a rough map in slide form if you want to try and ground yourself. But in grounding ourselves, we're going to move to the panel and I'm going to ask them just to give us the name and like what emotions or word they come with when they think about financial inclusion. So we do have a poet. So just a word and who you are. Could you introduce yourself to the wonderful people here today?
How's it going, everyone? Surfing Sofas. My friends here call me Justin. If you're not my friend, please don't quit. I'm joking. You could call me. I don't know how to behave, so they shouldn't even have put me on this panel today, because I'm probably going to say stuff like that that's going to make you all chuckle. Word that comes to mind when I think of financial inclusion. That's a hard one. I've got like 2 words that allow.
Go for it.
They're so close together. They're pretty much one word. Include me, please.
Awesome, thank you very much.
Yeah, my name is Matt Kidd from our agency, and yeah, it's kind of the word that springs to mind is to me is social class, basically.
Thank you, Matt.
I'm David Tovey. I'm one of the co-directors of Arts and Hobbies International. I'm also an artist, sort of, oh, word. I was thinking about stress. Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Stancer. I'm a member of our agency as well, and I also work at Lankelly Chase Foundation. And my word, I don't know, John.
It's okay. Uncertainty is a good one.
Yes, I'll have uncertainty, yeah.
Cool, thank you very much. You heard mention there our agency, so I can imagine you wondering what groups these people together. And for me, keeping it abstract, I kind of imagine it as a blanket that defines the work. And so as a blanket, some of it moves, some need more of it, some need less. That blanket is typified by an intolerance to poverty and looking for agency in the individual, the capacity for determination as a group, and a broader collective wisdom. It looks a little bit like a universal basic income, but it's probably very different from that, and it's closer to an unconditional one. I think the basic working aim for us going into it was looking for each person to have an income floor of around £30,000, and the idea was, or the hope, to keep that as going as long as possible while being flexible around different needs, hence the blanket. Some will need more, some will need less. We're looking at the really quick overview of what I think describes the work and the aims of our agency. Some more of the nuts and bolts will come from questions from yourselves, and some different ideas and interpretations of it will come from the panel who have been a part of it. So to start it and to land it, I'm going to start with, why is financial inclusion an area starting from? So I think I'll just, if you don't mind, I might start with you, Matt. Financial inclusion, why is it a useful area to start with?
It's deeply personal to me, and I'm going to try and keep this brief, emphasise the word try. So as a child attending a 1980s comprehensive in East Manchester with undiagnosed autism and dyspraxia, all the time, both me and my parents were just constantly being asked what's wrong with me. Why can't I couldn't write legibly, I couldn't tie my own shoelaces, I didn't have any friends, I was being bullied. And it's constantly like, that's a problem with him. What's wrong with him? Why doesn't he fit in? Why can't he write? Why can't he tie his shoelace? And to cut a very long story short, so from my answer to that from the age of 16 to 30 was to numb all that feeling that I'm not good enough, I don't belong, I'm a piece of shit. And the next significant part of that journey was that I stole quite a lot of money from someone that I was working for to feed my addiction, and I was then being told by the job centre, like, right, okay, no one's ever going to put you in a position of trust or responsibility again. You're going to have to apply for jobs that are going to do no background checks whatsoever. And I really latched onto this idea then, I'm going to find recovery and work in drug and alcohol services. And but conversely, like kind of, I was doing this course that was supposed to take you from being in services to working in services. It's called Bridging the Gap. And the person that was teaching on that course, I said to them, what would I need to do in order to do your job? And they said, well, at the start it would be a petals qualification, like kind of teaching adults. And I went to enrol one of them, and they said, why don't you just do a degree? There's a bursary attached to teaching degrees at the moment. So I did it, and cutting a very long story short, I was told on this degree, and this was probably one of the first compliments that I had that I properly accepted. Someone said, your level of critical thinking skills and analysis is really high. And like, there's loads of things in life I'm not good at. But I accepted that. I thought, you know what, you're right, it is. And I found for the first time in my life something that I actually felt, I'm not a piece of shit, I can do that pretty well. And the reason why I got to discover that was because I had the privilege of parents that during that time, from losing that job through stealing loads of money to finding that out, they could feed me, they could house me, they could clothe me. And services would try and put this redemption arc on both them and me. You know, public services saved my life because I took responsibility and I stopped taking drugs, and I let services save my life. And that's pretty much bullshit. I was fortunate enough, very fortunate enough to have a family that, like I say, would keep me housed, keep me fed, keep me clothed, and they'd take me out for kind of when there was a family meal, they'd take me out and they'd pay for me. And not a lot of people who've been through some of those same issues that I've had are fortunate enough to have a family that's financially secure. My family aren't rich, but they're comfortable to keep them through that. And it's only through having that safety net that I was able to go on and find out what I was good at. And I think a lot of people need that safety net to help them discover, kind of what they're good at.
Thanks, Matt. That was really personal, and what I got from that was that can desire extend a safety net and elements that you found useful. David, do you want to go back? Why the financial inclusion? Starting with the why. Why is that important for you? What do you see in it?
Power. It's probably the biggest thing for me. When you've got no money and you're living on the streets or living in temporary accommodation, whatever it is, you're held down. Like you can't move on. It's like an entrapment. And I think when you're stuck in that, your hope goes, your mental health suffers, your physical health suffers. You can't feed yourself properly. You have to go and eat all the crap, cheap food that literally has no nutrition in it. Everything about life is just shit, is probably the best way to put it, right? So when you've got, a bit of money in your bank account, you don't have that fear about going out and actually having a meal out with your mates, or going out for a drink, or going and watching a football match, whatever it is. These things you need in life, right? You need those stimulation of outside things and bigger and larger things than just surviving. And I think that's where, when you look at the benefit system in the UK, it's shocking. It destroys people, and personally I think it actually kills people. Because how can anyone survive on less than £300 a month when you've got the cost of living as it is at the moment? It's disgusting. And you end up like, you see like people who are living in that system, their skin is pale, it's like pasty, they've got no sort of like joy in their lives because they're literally just stuck in the house most of the time and stuff like that. So when you're in that, there is never a way out. There is never a way out. You get stuck. But they say, oh, just go and work, go and do this. But for a lot of people, they can't work. Like, you know, physically, mentally, you know, whether they've got physical ailments or illnesses. So they need something to still stimulate, because we all know that we need arts and culture. We know it's a human right. You know, I'm not going to bang on about that. We know that. But if you haven't got the money to even catch the bus, how can you go and use a cultural space? How can you go, like, you know, even go and buy a sandwich at Pret? Like, you know, because if you bought a sandwich at Pret, you know that you're not going to be able to feed yourself in the evening. Like, do you know what I mean? So that, to me, it's about having the power to actually decide what you want to do and actually make the choices that you want to do, instead of being told you're not allowed to do something because of the situation that you're in. That's what it is for me.
Thanks, Lord David. Bringing in power was useful. The DWP and our support networks being also a point of threat is really useful. And also, like, what our conceptions of work and worth are. I think that's all that's been, like, all of us have seen that throughout what we've done. I noticed you nodding there a bit, Justin. I don't know if you want to come in, you want to come in on the next one.
Not really, I'm just nodding in agreement. But what can I say? I think everybody's pretty much said what I would have said.
For you, like, why is financial inclusion something like you go, does it pique your interest? Why is it a useful place to start for others, maybe?
I feel like for me, a lot of my peers experience the opposite of financial inclusion. It's more like financial exclusion. And like, I don't know, I look at some of them and I feel like if they had access to finances, their quality of lives would be a lot different. And even things like family meals, like when you was talking just a second ago, man, I was thinking, wow, like, me and my siblings, we've never been out for a family meal with like my mum or dad, so it was like, I don't know, hopefully we can turn that around before they pass away, because they're both getting on now. And just little experiences like that kind of like, they kind of like, I don't know, I feel like life is a lot about making like memories and having experiences, and some of the best ones they're costly. So it's like, and money just helps with everything as well. I feel like the peace of mind of being able to like pay rent and keep a roof over your head, stay on top of your bills. Like, when you don't have those things, there's like the opposite of peace of mind, chaos of mind. So yeah, I feel like financial inclusion would be great in the world that we live in, to kind of level the playing field for more people.
Thank you. That's awesome. I think that's another complicating factor in it. There's peace of mind that you can't quite put a price on, but definitely has a cost. And the stuff about what we're doing is actually exclusionary. It's the hard stuff around boundaries and really tough decisions about who's in and who's out, and again how class informs that often. And so what's that, Justin? Kathy, financial inclusion. What brings you to this conversation? What's important to you in there?
Well, obviously, all of what's been said already, and I think, I guess, from my particular position, like of working for a foundation, as well as being involved in this, you know, being in both spaces, I think there's something about relationality and relationships, and it's something that you've said quite a bit, John, in the past, but there's a kind of sort of move in foundations and with funders to be more relational, and you know that it's all about relationships and funding relational services, and you know that are recognising that the connections between people are the things that keep us all going, you know, and keep us connected to each other, obviously. But there's that fundamental kind of issue of if you're funding lots of relational practice and lots of convening spaces where people are coming together, if, as you've said, John, if at the end of that one person is going off to a situation of abject material kind of marginalisation and poverty, and another person is going home to a nice house, there is something fundamentally wrong with that. And actually it's something that kind of charities, I think, and funders, they don't look at that bit. They look at the what it takes for us to be nice to each other, but actually that fundamental issue of material inequality is something that we all find really difficult to look at. So I think it's that for me, and trying to create a little space where normal rules don't apply, and where we are, to a degree at least, in a position of material equity, which then allows that relationality to really be honest, and where the other things that we're interested in as well can hopefully start to blossom. Yeah.
That's fantastically useful, Kathy. I want maybe take that and round the panel again with the redistribution angle. So, like, what's the most important element in what you want to see together going forward? Do you reckon it's closer to the redistribution of finances, or is it equity between members, or like a greater freedom? It's like, what? It's a question around what you're looking for next and what was important to you in it. Matt, you look like you're about to shoot it down.
I suppose it is that it's that kind of freedom to choose, and as I say, I've kind of like I've always in my life felt somewhat on the cusp between kind of working class and lower middle, because pretty much everyone that I went to school with was from a working class background, and my mum was a social worker and my dad was a college lecturer, which is also part of the reason I did my degree. And so I kind of like I analyse a lot. I know people from different class groups. I analyse a lot, like who gets to choose in their life, like kind of what they do for a living, and who gets decided for on the basis of, like, kind of the starting point in life, and who then gets stuck there, and it predominantly like kind of does relate to class, and that intersects obviously with race and gender and disability. And I think it's in order to change that, I think you've got to do something like really radically different, and I don't think it's kind of as straightforward as just I'm gonna nick this line from Yanis Varoufakis when he was talking from this. He said that, like, surely you shouldn't just be giving like a guaranteed income to everyone. Do it to the people that like can come to you and say that, like, kind of, oh, this is what I'd do with my money. Give it to the deserving poor. And he said that it's like kind of kind of human being, or like have some kind of state program to like that's in place to help people decide what they do in life. And he said that, like, people like humans have this incredible ability to find out for themselves what they want to do in life once they're free from terror. And like the terror comes from like the financial exclusion, but other stuff that's going on. And in order to change that, like, we've got to do something radically different.
Thanks, Matt. That really helps refine it a little bit more again. So to narrow that question based on what Matt said, might go to you, David. Do you feel like there's what we're engaged in or putting forward is an argument about changing and improving charitable culture, or is it something closer to justice and redistribution? What gives you the most energy? What you're most interested in there?
I think it's the justice side, because at the end of the day, there's so much money around in the world, but who has the right to that money? Because we know that we all work our asses off, pay our taxes, teach people, educate people. We're actually giving, there's never a taking away. And even if we were taken from the system, on a benefit system, we deserve that. That's all part of why it's there in the first place. Like, it's there for us to hold you up, prop you up. But when you're in that situation, you always feel like you're being treated as if you're like a criminal, like that you're robbing from the state, right? And that's not fair. Why they always have to down, and you feel downclassed and stuff. I've got a question actually, right? Has anyone ever been in arrears with their rent? Right? Has anyone? Yeah, there's a few hands, right? The feeling that you have when you're in arrears is fear that you're going to lose the place that you're staying in, right? Well, why should it be like that? Because we should all have the money to actually pay our rent. You know, it's one of those simple, fundamental human rights that we have housing, right? So why is there always that fear that you're going to lose it all the time? And it's done on purpose, like it's done as a control to hold you in a place, right? And then when you're stuck in that place, you can't move forward. It's impossible to move forward because you've always got that fear that you're going to lose your place. So you then concentrate everything to try and pay the rent. You work 3 jobs, you know, you don't see your kids, you know, your kids are out getting into trouble because they're not seeing their parents and being looked after as they should be. That's what it's like growing up. That's what it was like for me growing up, like constantly. You know, my parents would be working 3-4 jobs just to pay our rent and stuff. In the end, we couldn't even afford to pay our rent, and they had to get a job which had a house. So when you're stuck in that situation, you grow up in that situation, you always feel like that you've got to stay in that same situation. But there are a few of us that will, well, actually, no, I want more, I deserve more, like, you know, and you go and fight your way to keep going. It is all about justice, like, and that redistribution, because if you don't have that redistribution, that's going to carry on. And then homelessness will carry on, because as the cost of living goes up and that side of things, more and more people in those classes, and slowly going up into the sort of lower middle classes now, are finding it harder and harder to live, and it can't sustain itself. It has to give, something has to give. And I agree with what Matt was saying, that you've got to do something radical, because if we don't do something radical across the world, this is right, then people are just going to die, and it's that simple. So yeah, that's my thought on it.
Thanks. I feel the energy rise slightly in a room when you move things on rights and justice. I don't know if you want to come in on that a bit, Justin. Is there anything on rights, justice, or like ownership of what's being produced and who owns what there? Because
I don't really think I have nothing else to add to that, to be honest, John. I feel like it's self-explanatory. Like, I don't feel like anybody's in favour of injustice. Hands up if you are in favour of injustice. There we go. I don't have to ask the second question. So
which is a great controversial question. It's like, hands up who's recently participated in something that's with questionable justice.
Yeah.
Like, probably.
Probably.
It didn't feel great in the line for Pret this morning. It wasn't awesome. I'm pretty sure they didn't choose to be there. Sorry.
No, that's all.
Can I add a quick?
Please do.
It's just the thing, one of the, which also came from you, I think, one of the kind of sort of little mottos that we used to, when we were in the very early stages of trying to think about what this actually means in practice, was the line about, what if it was always yours to begin with? Which we kind of, what if it was always yours to begin with? Meaning resources. In our case, it was particularly philanthropic resources that exist, you know, on paper exist to alleviate poverty. So what if those resources were actually, you know, actually belong to the people they're intended to benefit from the beginning? How would that change things? What would that look like if that was actual, you know, if that was actualised? And that's a justice question.
Thank you. That's super useful, Kathy. There's another few elements, but it feels like it's a good time to open it out to the room. So if there's any questions about the nuts and bolts, I've noticed there's 2 here and there's 1 at the back. This is awesome. Maybe we'll start with the red jacket there. This is the question in the panel.
You said nuts and bolts. Actually, my question is, like, how is this actually working? Like, how has this trial happened? Where's the money from? What's been done? It'd be good to just go through the details, if that's okay.
Can you repeat the question, because we don't have a mic at the moment?
So just to repeat the question for the people on Zoom. Hello, people on Zoom. That was a question about, can you be more specific on what the structure looks like and where the money comes from? Am I missing any bits there?
And what's happened so far, I guess. Like
What?
the nitty-gritty really fascinates me. I think you might give us a grounding for further discussion.
And what's happened so far?
Mine is linked to this because I think it'd be really good if you can just like explain what's on the slide about this, the universal income pilot, and how following that neatly gets to discussion. Yeah.
So Samra added to the question of where does the money come from, what does it look like, some explanations around the universal income and so that was like it. That's
The
it.
universal income pilot that you guys are working with.
I'll respond really quickly because in my introduction, I was very vague. I used metaphors. I said it was a blanket. I think that gets translated into a network most commonly, but just for me, that doesn't quite fit. The same with the universal basic income or income floor. That didn't quite fit. What I think we knew intuitively was it needed more nuance, but what it looked like practically collided very quickly with people on benefits, people with no recourse to public funds, experience of trauma, and limited capacity to hold money in the financial vehicles that we have already. So there's a lot there that to cover, and hopefully I've padded this up enough to give my fellow panelists time to think what their responses would be. Matt's grinning awesomely, so I might start with Matt.
So the really, really hard thing with this was to like kind of identify, so say like kind of, so ideally we'd like a universal living income. Universal means absolutely everyone gets it. We couldn't, within our networks, find the level of financial resource to make it universal. We just couldn't. So you kind of got to do one of two things then. You've either got to do it based on existing relationships or do a lottery. And I think the reason why we went for the first one, a lot of the thinking was in mind, was we called a lot of people in to work as the Lad Kelly Chase funded work in Greater Manchester, and me being kind of one of the conduits for calling people in a way that started to feel really exploitative and harmful. I started to look at, and my day rates back then, I was doing better than, like, you know, kind of, in terms of my individual day rates. But like, we did this project, and one of the principles of it, and being very, very candid about this, one of the principles was we value all forms of knowledge equally. And I was looking at the finances, and I thought, how can we say that? You know, like kind of how, if we've got any integrity, we need to examine this and then say we're clearly not valuing all forms of knowledge equally. And so the people that we kind of called into that work, and a lot of the time we felt like they were being called into to kind of give their trauma, if you like, and that was the context that they're being called. You tell me what it's like to be a person with severe and multiple disadvantage in Greater Manchester, and then we'll go and take that knowledge and present it to someone else. And all the stuff about being radically different. So those existing relationships with those people that we called in, we wanted to start doing something radically different, and I guess we were also working with Atlas Homelessness International around kind of, you know, shared values really, and you know, kind of there can be and there probably will be quite a lot of critique around kind of who we've chosen, if you like, and kind of who's ultimately not been, but whichever way we've done it, I think there'd be a critique, and you've got to start somewhere, and making the existing relationships that we had feel more ethical and feel more comfortable felt the best place to start.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, in very practical terms, it's a network of 4 groups of people who are kind of semi sort of existing groups with relationships already, because the kind of collective decision making and mutual support was part of our thinking. So, and that's one of the things that differentiates it from universal basic income, because in a universal basic income pilot, people are not necessarily connected, but we were thinking about ideas about community and mutuality and mutual support, as well as the kind of income stuff. Whether that's played out in reality is, I mean, there's a whole other conversation. But so basically, it's 4 connected groups of people, about 28 people altogether, who are in this kind of our agency network.
And do they get paid a salary, or do they have to apply for something, or is it a shared bank account that you spend from, or like what's the? Sorry for the nitty-gritty, but I'm really interested in it.
So I'll go back to the panel with it, but just for me, I think that's where the flexibility comes with it as well.
Yeah.
So we spent quite a lot of time drawing up a number of options, one of which was a salaried role, one of which was kind of invoicing personally for work you need, one of which unfortunately still was charitable donations, and there was a 4th as well. Yeah, whatever was compatible with the current benefit system. Those seem like really closely linked, but they are slightly distinct, and it's quite granular. I think we can share more later in the future. It'd be useful, but that was trying to answer it. I'm sure I've missed bits. I'll pass back to the panel to learn a bit more.
So I guess just to add, where the highest level of dignity kind of seems to exist is where we can do this as an employment contract, and it really does feel like your money when it's kind of just paid into your bank as salary. Now, unfortunately, not everyone's in a position for themselves to where choosing that option is going to be good for them in the long term. Predominantly, like due to DWP, some other stuff to do with the Home Office and stuff like that. Do they have to apply for it and have to present themselves in hardship and having an emergency? That's a really, really uncomfortable area where sometimes, because to do stuff with the Charities Commission and charitable terms and stuff like that, and someone's individual circumstances, sometimes kind of technically, yes, to do with that charitable donation stuff, and we're just trying to handle the power dynamics of that as best we can, so it doesn't actually feel like coming cap in hand and saying, please sir, I'm in an emergency, can I have some money? But as I say, the tension between doing that and complying with the law is a really difficult one to manage.
I just think that bridges on something I think you wanted to touch on, Kathy, which is tensions and safety, maybe from an institutional aspect, and just a little bit more on the DWP.
Thanhanks, John.
Sorry. What I kind of meant was the strange thing about. Yeah, I didn't want to throw in the bus there. I think I did. The power dynamics in play, which is the basic uncomfortable things to talk about, and the identifying how the DWP do target people. Like, this isn't just a site of support, it's felt and acts as a means of social control and used for political gain. It's like they say the NHS is a political football. The DWP uses people as political footballs for from bedroom tax onwards, and it's been something historically. But I think what I meant, making it a bit less jagged, was how we tried to bring care into this. How that was one of the principles, trying not to do bits.
Yeah, and it has been really difficult, and I think it's been difficult in multiple ways. I think there's care and there's also collectivism, because one of the principles we were so if our 4 principles were poverty and tolerance, which is the basic income bit, another one was collectivism and collective decision making and mutuality, and then another was the one about productivity, so that we want to value people as people, we want to value healing, caring. You don't have to be productive, it's not in the conventional sense. But anyway, the one about collectivism I think has been really difficult, because just getting something like this going has needed kind of a higher level of input from some people, i.e. us. So it has ended up feeling like there are decision makers with more decision-making authority than others, and it's that thing about flat structures, really, about how you actually get to a place where there is collective decision-making. And we're kind of working through that at the moment, so that the decision-making is being cascaded down to each of the groups, which in some ways feels better, in other ways is just bringing the same dynamics with it, really, and feeling just as complicated as it did when it was just us making decisions. So the whole thing is kind of fraught with tensions and challenges, not least around care and trauma as well, because we're in a way trying to be a bit like an intentional community without living together, and that implies a level of care for each other as well, and all sorts of different levels of capacity that people have to be involved, and so it's very complex in practice.
That's awesome, Cassie. Thank you. I noticed you nodding there, David. I don't know if you want to speak a little to the felt experience of flat structures before checking back with the last few
I think
questions.
it goes back to that very first thing about power, doesn't it? Like, and who has the right to make the decision on who gets the money, or who has the right to tell them what it could be spent on, etc. When you get your wages at the end of the day, right, when you're working a flat structured job, no one's actually telling you what you can spend that money on, right? They're not saying that you've got to you've got to pay your rent with that bit, you've got to go and buy shopping with that bit, you've got to do that. You make those decisions yourself. So and I can see why it's been so difficult as well to make that decision of who gets the money first of all, and why do they have to come with that begging note to say I need money to pay my rent? But actually, it's not even that, is it? It's just about saying actually we've got some money to distribute, and there it is, type thing. But it always adds a power structure to it, because it's like that feeling of who should have that money. And are they deserving enough, isn't it? I remember we were speaking about this on a Zoom once, who's seen as deserving enough or poor enough to have that money, type thing. And that will always bring problems. So where it's been cascaded down to different groups, it's like they're still going to have that same problem, aren't they? Right? What was the other part of that question you threw at me then?
It was a little bit of a reflection on any personal feelings around flat structures.
Yeah. So I think flat structures are brilliant, as long as it's done in a way where you're not all doing the same job. Because I think if you're all doing the same thing, then there's always going to be that tension of sort of who has that overall sign off, right, tick, done, let's move on to the next job type thing. And I think flat structures work if it's split down and so what we do at AHI, we do it where we actually choose the parts of the organisation that we want to focus on, and there are crossovers in certain things, and that should be like that. But overall, we all make it as a collective decision of where we're going forwards, what we're spending that money on. Is this good that we're doing that summit? Trust me, there's been arguments, mainly from me, because I'm just stubborn, and that's always going to be the place. But you've got to have that in a way. You've got to have those disagreements to actually work out when something's not quite right. So I actually think flat structures are probably going to come in more and more, especially in the charity sector, because I think it's probably the best way forwards. Because at the moment, having that chief exec, policy makers, but and the breakdown, I just don't think it works. Well, we know that charities don't properly work anyway, like the bigger ones, because we've still got this problem of homelessness. It's still there, and it's getting bigger. So why not be radical and change how we do it, in the charity sector? We're doing it, and it seems to be working at the moment. Can't guarantee it's always going to work, but there are certain elements of it that actually our stretch as an organisation, for such a small organisation, is far larger, and we're actually getting more impact than some of the bigger charities that are making 50, 60, 70 million a year. So we must be doing something right by having a flat structure. So it's quite simple, isn't it?
Thanks a lot.
Woo! Sorry.
I'll check with two other questions before finally coming back with a last bit from the panel on the overall kind of context, the charitable industrial complex, and what the environmental asks might be useful next. So there's a question right at the back there.
It's Kathy, right? So your organisation is, I think you're redistributing assets and closing. Is that right?
That is true, yeah.
What are the opportunities for organisations, or surrounding organisations that might want to? What opportunities does it present for people who want to, I guess, respond to that? And also, what, as an organisation, what are you doing in terms of financial literacy also?
Financial literacy,
Yeah.
you say? On the first question about the Lankelly's redistribution, that's in a very early stages of a process. So I don't know is the honest answer. I don't know what that's going to look like or how people will be able to get involved with that. So I can't really say any more than that on Lankelly itself. On the financial literacy thing, I don't know. Do you mean in terms of like organisations we've funded or? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a topic in itself, I guess. So
Yeah.
we're talking financial inclusion.
Right.
To be included is one thing.
Yeah.
To know what to do with it once you
Yeah.
do it is
Yeah.
another thing.
No, I think that's really good. It's a
As
really,
you're a funder, as you
Yeah.
give money or you have grants,
yeah.
is financial literacy part of application process and part of how your relationship is with the people who award the money to?
I guess it kind of has been. Like I was talking before about being a relational funder, we've tried to be a relational funder, and that has meant having conversations about all sorts of things with people. It hasn't been a kind of specific focus, it's just something that's come up among lots of other things, I guess. Sorry, that's not a very satisfactory answer. Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. There's almost zero satisfactory answers in any of this I found. But while we keep searching for them, I don't know if you want to come back to the question. Anyone else on the panel?
I mean, I think that the stuff around financial literacy and kind of track records of managing money is like a really interesting one, because it's like kind of don't want to like dismiss its importance, but like kind of audit, like in my experience, kind of tends to keep money where it's already gone and where it already exists. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't have any form of audit or accountability. We should, but it's like, how do we change those processes? So like if we are like redistributing and we're putting money into hands where it's not previously been, like, you know, kind of, because usually when you apply for money, and I've been on both sides of the fence, and I had to leave an old organisation I went into because it all became about, you know, being part of the charitable industrial, and it was doing really, really well, and it still is doing really, really well in relation to that. But like it in my previous life, I've also kind of grafted money and manipulated money out of people, and it felt like I was doing the same thing, and it's just in a very legal way, and it felt wrong, and like that's something that I don't want to do anymore, and I think there's you know kind of a big question out there to like how we, you know, kind of how we do something differently and more ethically, so it's not all about like, you know, kind of finding a legal graft, which a lot of the time, unfortunately, like forming a charity or a CIC, it ends up going that way.
Begging.
Thanks loads, Matt. I think we've got about 5 minutes-ish left. And
just have an online comment from Mary from Doncaster.
thank you very much.
Food bank. She was saying that in regards to she was saying that a lot of her food bank guests feel far removed. Thank you. Feel far removed from the financial inclusion and the education surrounding money may make some of them feel they can never get any better. And she was also saying that, you know, we have agencies on site where she is, and you know they always have to ask for additional support to include their finances. So it's, yeah, I mean, if you go to food bank anyway, you're struggling. So but the fact you feel removed was like the main point that Mary was saying. We'll just get that in.
so that felt an ask more than a question, and a comment about distance from the really grassroots felt need and inclusion in the conversation. Maybe we'll touch on that again as a roundup. There's hands. I think you've been the longest, and we'll come to you.
Yeah. Sorry, it's for you again. Hi, my name's Sarah, and I've just got a question regarding, like, the context sounds and feels very Victorian in terms of this experience of people who are being willingly neglected by government and given essentially a life of destitution. Your organisation, it sounds like, is collecting really interesting data, and I just wanted to ask, what's the journey of that data and the information in all of its ways, qualitative, quantitative, that you're gathering? Because for me, I look at organisations like the Heritage Lottery Fund. Why should a church, St James Piccadilly, get 20 million to re-roof a church and whole environment when I know that people who are in there during the day are sleeping there without access to recourse of public funds? So, and when we look at the people that buy the lottery ticket and the life that they live, they're not getting that money back. And so I've just got a question regarding what do we do to start to address policymakers, but also challenge some of what are seen as the big funders of our public and civil life to stop this Victorian trend.
Yeah.
I like that.
So, I don't know if you want to come back to Kathy, then we'll go to Justin. So,
I ain't gonna speak about,
Yeah, I guess well, it's really difficult, isn't it? I mean, I think, like, partly what Lankelly Chase is intending to do through its decision is to be part of a conversation about that kind of thing, and we are part of networks of other funders and foundations, and we know that those organisations are full of people who want to do things differently. So I don't want to suggest that, like, because I work for a funder, and I have friends in other foundations. I don't want to suggest, like, funders are bad, and they're full of people who really, really want to use that special position of kind of freedom and money to do things really differently. So I guess it's about having more and more conversations about it, and really bringing it above the waterline, and asking really hard questions of ourselves about what is the purpose of these organisations. I can't think of anything else really. I mean, I think
in
it's
terms of data and policy.
Oh, the data, yeah. I mean, to be absolutely honest, Lankelly's not been a terribly organised organisation in terms of collecting, I wouldn't say data. I think we've got lots of stories and lots of learning, and we're trying to pull stuff together in advance of our closure to share some of our experience and our learning, and some stories from people we've worked with as well, to try and kind of raise some of this stuff up in terms of dialogue. I'm not sure we're the right organisation to talk kind of authoritatively about data, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. The journey from what we learn and what we do is not a linear one, is it? Justin, I noticed you wanted to jump in on the...
I didn't really want to jump in, but I've got a room full of poets in Studio 9 that are waiting for me, so I've got to depart. But I want to leave with a thought, if you lot don't mind me sharing.
Please do.
And it's about that thing we call money. Lots of the working class and below struggle to grab hold of it, while lots of the middle class and above juggle a crap load of it. Some have so little of it and have to tackle obstacles with it, and some have so much of it that they don't know what to do with it. The world is full of problems, but it's also full of people with solutions. But these solutions often lack financial inclusion. There's geniuses that I've met this week in this very building who are underprivileged, who don't have finances to fund ideas or to fund a business. There's something that I've always heard people say in modern times and back in the good old days. You probably know the saying, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Hands up if you heard that before. Yeah, and sometimes it really does feel and look those ways. I was born in the south of England, not London. I was born in the south, but I reside, wow, my hands are shaking. I was born in the south, but I reside up in the north. And I've spoken at conferences with Sir Michael Marmot, where I've heard him say many people die young in the north, which always made me think of people and friends that I love in the north. Poverty has big effects on mortality rates because families are forced into diets that are low in nutrition, especially in the north. So if you find yourself judging the poor, maybe it's time for you to challenge those inner inhibitions. I don't know why this feels like, and I don't know why this feels so delicate to talk about, but I feel confident that together we can sort it out. So thank you for allowing me this time to share this, and I hope for a day where we see financial fairness. And on that note, I'm out. Thank you for having me, and I catch you later.
Thank you. A massive thank you to Justin for eating into his workshop to sit on a panel with us. And apologies to our next, maybe last questioner for having to follow Justin, but that's just as it is.
Hi, yeah. I was you talk about like redistribution, but I'm a bit confused as to where the redistribution is actually happening. Like, where is it being redistributed from? Because if it's really just coming from grants, from like private funding, from kind of donors and stuff, that has more in common with Victorian philanthropy style stuff than it does with actual, even the mildest kind of like Keynesian economics, like post-war stuff, is like significantly more redistributive than that. Like I fully agree with this kind of like income floor for people who've experienced homelessness and this kind of thing. I'm not kind of like questioning that. I'm just kind of like, what does it really mean if it's being funded in this way, but then I don't know whether it being funded by the state would necessarily be any better. I'm a long-term benefit claimant, and like I know what that's like to be to be up against the DWP or just the state in general, or like local authorities are even worse than the DWP in many ways, so you know what I mean. But yeah, I'm interested in that.
So, thank you, that's a super useful push. I can feel they both want to speak on it. Who would like to go first? Do you want to go first, Kathy, or Matt?
Well, I was going to say, you're absolutely right, I mean, it is, in some ways, it's a semantic thing. It has come from a foundation, it's from the endowment, and we don't want to talk about it as a grant. We don't want it to feel like a grant, because that would imply all that stuff. But it is, in actual fact, it's, in the scheme of things, it's tiny, it is still philanthropic money. We're just kind of trying to make it real in a very, very fragmentary way at the moment. And that's all we can do, really.
And it's kind of dependent on someone that's done some kind of analysis and said, you know what, this money's come through extraction, it exists because of extraction, and we want to do something differently with it. And I like kind of, in terms of the Charities Commission, it still has to technically, legally be thought as a grant, even if we want to like reimagine that and do something different with it. And ideally, like redistribution would mean all the people that have done really extractive, horrible things to the economy, like, look at it, say, like, you know what, like, we don't deserve to be sitting on this money. The vast majority of them haven't done any of that kind of thinking, and any money that they do, in Rockefeller Foundation and anything else is just, I really wish I hadn't started kind of analysing all that stuff, because it's kind of really, really bad. It's like, so you have to start somewhere, and that somewhere has to be with someone that thinks that, like, you know what, why have we got this money? Are we the right people to have it? And kind of our only existing relationship there, like, is through, philanthropic resources. And the question of how you get more money from the hands of people that have got too much and who've done that through extraction is a pertinent one, and a big worry of mine is that we're going to run out of those people really, really quickly. Any advice from anyone about how we do that would be gratefully received.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And that's, I suppose, how we will be looking at end it, with further pushes going forward, because it's kind of, it's never going to be satisfactory, the elements. Like one element of like rejecting the deserving versus undeserving function of charity. That is necessary, but not sufficient in what we're getting at. The questioning of like, where did this philanthropical capital come from in the first place? Like, to say it was co-created with generations of workers and just flat out exploited, maybe. This is all debated, and it's like, I think there's room for it and there's pressures to it, but we're really limited in what we can say by the things that we can do, and this is the smallest bit we could do right now. And if the language of redistribution tries to accelerate and brings other funders into it, I think we're going to try and use it. I think that might bring us closer to the end, but I don't want to end without you feeling like there's any little bits left unsaid. So is there any last thoughts on the sector or the scene or asks for the audience?
I've got one very last thing to say, that I feel that I think we need to sort of like change the charity commission in a sort of way where charities aren't begging. It goes back to like you know, having been in that situation of poverty where you feel like you it's illegal to beg, obviously, like, you know, and you get arrested for it. You then start running a charity and then you have to beg like your money, but it's a legal way of begging, and I find that structure is just terrible, like, you know. So I think like if the redistribution of wealth and power can then also address the sort of like the begging like structures of like the charity system, I think that would actually then start to then, you know, plateau in a way, sort of like going forward.
Thanks, David. Any last thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, just one more thought on that Keynesian economics thing, and like kind of I wanted to make this point where I come in. We're told that anything other than neoliberalism and the sky's gonna fall in, and there's evidence that it doesn't. You know, the United States during that period of Keynesian economics. Also, coincidentally, the point that people were really, really scared that communists were just going to come in and take it all. Like, you know, kind of they employed, under the New Deal, 15 million unemployed people to do stuff, so the government did, and there was a 90% tax rate on the highest earners. And, like, yeah, that's the wider stuff that, you know, kind of that needs to change, and how do you influence that, I think is a key question, and that question of like, do you focus on reform in like the hands of where massive money does, or do you prove what's possible with the people that's done that thinking? That's something we're debating all the time.
Thanks, Matt. Cathy?
Not really, only to say thank you, because this is sort of like our first public outing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's really helpful to have the questions and be really up for any conversations afterwards as well.
Thank you. As Cathy said, this is the end of our time sat here, but not the end of the conversation. So thank you to Cathy, David, Matt and Justin. And thank you to you.
Thank you also to John for chairing brilliantly. Just one word before letting you have a 45-minute break before the next session. Please do enjoy anything in the festival. One of Arts and Homelessness International's functions and lines of inquiry in all of this is the sort of injustice that we're all feeling about paying artists fairly in all of our work, where although the UK has a benefit system, a lot of people are prevented from accepting work because of fear of losing those benefits, or that the ceiling of earnings is so small. So we're doing a bit of work, DWP, we've got some resources on our website around benefits. There's another organisation who isn't here called Social Change Nest, who have some really good information around what you can accept that doesn't affect benefits, such as topping up savings, gifts, things like that. So we have a bit of information about that. Thank you so much. It's the most amazing privilege to have you guys here. And see you all again at 12 for a conversation around trauma. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.